Okay, I think we will get started. So thank you all for joining us today for the first Soapbox webinar of 2023. We're really excited to be here and have you here. My name is Niamh Bushnell, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at SoapBox Labs. And I am delighted to be joined today by Toby Mather, who is the CEO of Lingumi and has been working with us, a client of ours, for about 4 years now. I'm also joined by Declan, who is our head of UX here at SoapBox. And we're looking forward to a really lively conversation. We're going to start with Toby, who's going to give us a presentation and show some of the work that Lingumi have been doing over the last couple of years using voice, sharing a lot of his insights and best practices. And then we're going to kick it off and just open the floor to a conversation and between Declan and Toby, but also everybody out there as well. So, feel free to jump in and ask questions. We're going to use the Q&A for questions today, not the chat. So if you have questions, make sure you move over to the Q&A for posting those, and we will be monitoring that. If we don't get to your question, which often happens because we get a lot of questions at these webinars, just email us the questions. So send it to hello@soapboxlabs.com, and we will come back to you over the next couple of hours or days with an answer, and we'd be happy to jump on a call, do a demo, whatever works, whatever your needs are. We're also recording this, so we will be sending out the recording on Monday so you can share it with your colleagues. We also have a survey that we tend to send out after these webinars because we really want to get feedback from people on the content that was presented, on the questions that you have, and also ideas for other topics for the future. We'd love to get your feedback on topics related to voice and to the education use cases that we power. So SoapBox, if you don't know SoapBox, we are voice tech for kids. We are proprietary voice tech built specifically for kids' voices. And in the education space, we power a lot of different education use cases, all the way from pre-K through to 12. Some of the most common ones are phonological awareness, early literacy, all the way through to oral reading fluency and comprehension assessments. So we power all parts of the literacy journey for clients. We also power language learning apps and tools and platforms, dyslexia screeners, speech therapy apps, science and math apps as well. And we have over 50 education customers around the world. And some of those companies are McGraw-Hill, Lingumi are here, Amplify, Imagine Learning, many companies that would be household names for many of the people who are on this call today. We are a privacy first and equity by design company. So our clients do a lot of robust testing on our platform and our voice engine to ensure that it shows no bias for children of different ages, accents, and dialects. And this is a fundamental principle of the company. We have built our voice engine to show no bias, and we were independently verified for being for showing no bias by Digital Promise in October this year, actually 2022, last year. We were the first company ever, the first AI company ever to be certified for prioritizing racial equity in AI design. So we're really, really proud of that. So there's loads about that on our website. We keep talking about it very proudly. So if you want to know more, just jump over to soapboxlabs.com and you'll find out about it there. I think that's a good enough warm up. I will pass it over now to Toby. Take the floor.
Thanks, Niamh. Someone's marketing a tool in the comments to transcribe your meetings called Beulah, but I think we're not using it right. So I think we can say today is Beulah's day off. And with that, hi everyone, I'm Toby Mather, I'm the CEO of Lingumi. We are a smart tutoring platform. And our mission, just to start at the really high level, is to bring the world's best teaching experience to children through technology. And what we mean by that is we really believe in the relationship between a teacher, a human teacher, and a learner. And I think, ever since sort of Aristotle, this has been a really good model of education, but it's very, very hard to scale it to every child. I feel very lucky with the education I've had, but I remember one teacher who really changed my life, and that was just coincidence and luck. It was a good fit for me. And I feel like, if we deliver on the mission of Lingumi, it's using technology to help many, many more children find that great teacher for them, that great first teacher, whether that's to learn English, a foreign language, which is where Lingumi started, or learn to read in English, learn their phonics, learn to read in English, or learn other languages and other subjects. So with our product, what we try to do is take the magic of a really charismatic human teacher. Maybe some of you think back to when you were at primary school, secondary school, you remember that one teacher you really loved. We want to capture that magic in a bottle and use technologies to make that really accessible at scale. And part of that is about being asynchronous. We want our lessons to feel alive and interactive, but they're delivered asynchronously. And that means using lots of AI-powered tools and working with partners who use AI-powered algorithms like SoapBox do to make the experience feel very contingent to young learners. So just to run through the key features of our platform, first and foremost is voice and video interactivity. This is really at the heart of a lesson on Lingumi across any course. Students can listen to a question from their teacher, they can answer their teacher, get responses from their teacher, using algorithms like SoapBoxes and a bunch of other tools to make that feel as alive as possible. The second is we give our teachers these really flexible teaching formats to teach letters, words, combine words into phrases, test children, practice certain things, etc. And we've got a whole suite of these activity types that teachers plug into their lessons, customize as they wish, all on this self-serve tool set, which is part 3, this self-serve suite that we built for our teachers that they use to create their lessons really quickly, really easily, and then publish them to the world, A/B test them, and so on, and collect data back on how children are doing. And just zooming in then on point 1 there, that the voice and video interactivity, we use these underlying technologies to generate a bunch of experiences and activity types for our teachers to give to their learners. With Declan later, we'll go into a bit more detail on some of these, but just to show a couple of examples from a phonics lesson on the left and an English speaking lesson on the right. Here are some ways that we've seen our teachers using these tools. So this is a learning, I think, the S phoneme.
Sun.
So then you reply, can't hear me saying it.
Oh, well done.
And we want that experience to feel alive and reciprocal to the child and give them that feeling of reward. And on the right here, you will hear me pretending to be a 6-year-old responding to the teacher because I recorded the voiceover to it.
What is that?
Piano.
That's okay. Can you say, that is the piano?
That is a piano.
Woohoo! You are so clever.
And I like playing around with some of the data we get back from the SoapBox algorithm, and we're playing around there with the sensitivities. If you say the piano, is that right or wrong? So the flexibility of working with a partner that delivers sort of algorithmic tools is you can decide, is that right or wrong in the educational context that you're creating. And I think Declan and I will go into that a bit more later. And what we're trying to build there is an experience that isn't live but feels alive, and that's really at the heart of Lingumi's mission in terms of the user experience. Sorry. And around that, we've got all these other flexible teaching formats. So looking at exactly the same underlying technologies, but plugged into a different type of gamified experience. We can see this. Here's me competing with teacher Hannah. Just said the word violin and got a 73. And that's me saying it. I'm getting one of my best scores ever there with a 95. And we would dive into this as much as we want in the Q&A, but we are artificially suppressing the teacher score because we notice from user testing, kids love beating their teacher. And I'm sure for anyone who's used Kahoot, the feeling of beating someone in a classroom context is really powerful. And on the right there, I put some screenshots and GIFs of some of the other formats we give our teachers to play with. And for anyone who's interested in that sort of stuff, then send me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn. So, what does this mean for young learners? core to Lingumi is getting children speaking. We started out just with English as a foreign language and trying to get 2, 3, 4-year-olds learning to speak English as a foreign language. We've expanded our age range and subject range since then, but that remains at the heart of what we do. And as I've spoken over the years to the SoapBox team, we've talked a lot about different categories of speech. And category 1, before you even think about plugging in algorithmic tools, is just inspiring a child to have the confidence to achieve the learning goal that their parent or you as an organization have set. And this is one you really don't want to miss out on. And if we look here, there's no data connected coming out the back of this. This is just an experience designed to get a child engaging with their teacher. And I think for anyone who's ever been a teacher in a classroom like I have, you'll remember how hard it can be sometimes to kind of get children at the back of the room engaged in the lesson. And there are some situations where technology cannot improve on the experience of being in real life with a teacher. But there are some situations where user interface design, user experience design, and technology really can go beyond what is possible in the classroom. And this is really one of them, making these very rich experiences for children. And then on the right here, when we talk about measuring speech, this is one of our kind of old legend videos, which some of you may have seen in SoapBox's material. But when you do measure speech, it can be really exciting for the child. And this is one of our earliest interfaces we built, this thermometer. And you say I.
I. 我们两兄弟在讲爱。
So, we love watching. We've got lots of different experiences now for children to get scores back, but we just love watching them responding to the output. And just I won't dwell on this, but for on the teacher side, what we give them is this web-based tool set to really simply pull together these lessons, experiment with different orders of activities, different complexity and difficulty levels for children, what goals they're setting, what are they asking children to repeat, or what are they looking for, and then getting a bunch of rich data out the back on how children are performing, which we'll look at in a bit more detail. And just to zoom out at what Lingumi offers, we started out life as a really English-speaking focused company, and that's really still at the heart of what we do. The first ever course was my own and started as just 60 lessons. We've now got well over 300 lessons over several levels, and now several courses since I actually made this slide for 2 to 8-year-olds. We've added, with leaning into the SoapBox partnership further, at the very end of last year, we've added the beginnings of a phonics curriculum and beginning our way towards a literacy curriculum there. And we also just begun experimenting with foreign languages and beginning to, do alpha testing on kids learning those. And just looking at the journey of working with SoapBox over the years, I remember SoapBox, when we first approached them, they were like, who are these random people? I'm not sure we even really had a proper website at that point. But, I think we were maybe one of the faster partners to integrate. But it is easy to integrate this type of technology because this basically is the entire, code required to run a request. You plug into the API and then you send the API a recording, and you look for a word breakdown, and that you get back really simple JSON payloads like this, which can score whatever you pass into it. As people often ask me, is this proprietary AI that you guys are building? So you don't need to build proprietary AI. It's like you don't need to build an LLM when you can use OpenAI, GPT-3, blah blah blah. It's the same across this sorts of tools. SoapBox are specialists at this. And being able to get back this form of really well-packaged data means it's much faster for us to build great experiences, which is what we care about for children. And knowing that we can rely on a partner who's always going to give us accurate scoring nice and quickly. And looking just in a bit more detail at some of the results we get out of that, this is where a teacher has asked a child to say "in the fridge," and we can see an aggregate score of 30 at the top here. But we can also see a score per word that the child has said. And this is really, coming out of the box from the API, which is really useful. And, as Lingumi, we've been pretty bad at doing this actually, but I say bad, we haven't begun doing this really yet, but we'd love to be able to say, okay, hang on, what does this mean? It means the child really knows the word fridge very well. They can pronounce that word well, but probably the syntactic information around that, the preposition, etc., the article, are the bits of speech that they're missing or they haven't quite mastered. Let's zoom in on that. Let's, as Americans seem to say on podcasts, let's double click on that. Sorry to my American participants in the room, but you could, curriculum-wise, you could double click on that and take the child into some more practice. And what we get at the back of that, and what we have spent some time, not as much time as I'd like to, building out, is data for teachers on how the children are doing. And that is something we can do at the, say, phonemic level with the phonics. So here we can see breakdowns for how children are doing by phoneme, by score across the population, and we can cut that 1,000 ways by age, by geography, etc. But we also can look at things like scores for a certain phoneme by child age on aggregate. So, for example, here, you'll not be surprised to see that the older children are, the better they're performing on phonemic accuracy for this bit. Well, I didn't track what phoneme I was looking for here, but it seems to track pretty nicely with age, which makes sense because as children's vocal cords develop, their clarity improves. So I think I haven't dwelt a lot on UI and UX, but we're here to really focus in on building voice experiences, building experiences that embed voice. And what we've learned, and we were very naive about this at the beginning, is these are weirdly hard problems to solve. And for all the product people in the call, you'll know kind of how hard it is to solve product problems. Even when you've got users right in front of you, you can test with, sometimes it's still really difficult to find the right or the best solution. There's no right solution. So this is the problem, just to focus on this one, of how do you indicate it's time to speak to a child, your turn. And do you use a tappable button? This thing pulsing here is a button. Well, when I sat down with one of our new team members last week and presented them this activity, they watched that thing pulsing and they spoke and they spoke and they spoke and nothing happened because they thought it wasn't a button. They thought it was an invitation to speak. Or do you use automatic listening and just start listening and hope the child notices that and starts speaking? Well, we do that a lot, but what you observe in recordings, in user testing sessions, is often the child speaks too early, they speak too late, they take too long, etc. And then they get frustrated. Do you use a video feed? Sorry, you have to see my face again, but there you go. Front-facing video feeds are quite effective because the child realizes the spotlight is on them. So we started integrating those more. Or do you use the old-fashioned classroom trick of putting your hand to your ear? And there's been this sort of, in the world of live tuition, I've noticed a real push towards what they call total physical response, which is teachers going, hey, are you happy? And things like that, which I naturally, maybe this sort of the British sensibility in me, I'm not a big fan of. I think it's sometimes patronizing to children to overdo those types of cues. Children are really, really smart. But having some sort of cue language physically from the teacher has really helped us to kind of tap into telling the child when to speak. So the answer is there is no right answer. All of these have pros and cons. And I think we'll dive in on that sort of experience and hear some more of SoapBox's experience with this in a moment. So I'm going to shut up, at least for a bit, and hand over to Niamh, and then I think on to Declan.
Super, Toby, I love that. I love that video of the two little boys. I've been playing that for years now and I never get tired of it. So cute. So we haven't got any questions from our audience yet. So I'll dive in and, I met you back in 2019 and it was great. You came to Dublin and hung out with us for a while and we all got to know each other a little bit better. I always thought of you as a language learning company. So I was really excited last year to see you moving into the phonics area. And I'm guessing with voice, that's quite a different place for you to be in, voice-powered phonics versus language learning. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. This was definitely market pull. I come from a language learning background, sort of both in terms of teaching experience and academically, and that was my area of research focus at the beginning of before Lingumi and then funding Lingumi. And what we observed over the years was parents always asked us, how can our child learn their letters? And when I learned to read, it was all A, B, C, learning letter names, but I didn't know a lot about phonics. I still don't know a lot about phonics. Luckily, one of our team is a real expert on it. But the market pull built and built and built, and eventually we thought we have to, you know, serve a great product, and we took our time over it, and we think we built really a phenomenal phonics teaching product. But I think part of the fear was that I didn't understand the phonics space myself personally, and for founders in the room, you know, that's like the first time you add a kind of adjacent product that's not your background, it's sort of a big unknown. I would say there are two big things I've learned in the journey. One is that the scope of accuracy is totally different with phonics versus language learning. So with language learning, we're often looking for, I haven't thought the right sort of semantics for this, but we're looking for correctness over accuracy, in the sense that if a child says the word dog, even if the accent is different, or, you know, they shout it for a long time, dog, they have learned the word dog. Or if you're trying to say this is a red dog and they say this is the red dog, they probably mastered the skill of trying to teach them, even if the article is definite or indefinite. With phonics, you're teaching for accuracy. You really want the child to come out the back with a correct phoneme sound. And one of the complaints we hear from educators is that often teachers themselves lack, or certainly live teachers on Zoom, I hear this a lot, lack really good phonics training, and parents certainly lack it. And so they need to lean into digital tools to get that exactly right. So, you know, SoapBox is well equipped to help measure accuracy on individual phoneme level, but the way that our experiences were built wasn't really suited to that. For example, our thresholding, the way we treat scores is we are always focused on giving more false positives than false negatives. We'd rather say to the child, yes, you're right, and encourage them, than accidentally risk telling a child who's right that they're wrong if it just sounds a bit different how we would expect it to sound. With phonics, that's a much finer line because it really can be wrong, and you don't want to tell them the right when they're wrong, especially as they get a bit older and they're focusing on their sounds a bit more. So, you know, age plays into it, phonemic accuracy plays into it, background noise plays into it. There's all sorts of variables that we're learning our way around at the moment.
Yeah, it's a really complex area. A lot of our clients are now doing early literacy stuff and around the phonological awareness phonics area, and, you know, SoapBox engine has that level of accuracy down to the phoneme level that allows them to make voice a real tool and a real value for the classroom or the home or wherever it's being used. There's loads of questions coming in, which I'm delighted to see, and they just a quick scan, they look like stuff that are not specific to you, Toby. So before we dive into those questions, what we might do is hand over to you. Do you want to just talk a little bit about Toby's presentation and some of the things that jumped out at you, and then we can we can open the discussion more broadly?
Sure. Thanks again for that, Toby. Really interesting to see it. I mean, to be honest, this is the fun part of the job, because what we get to see is that handover to clients when they take the technology and start doing work with that. So the team at SoapBox have spent years perfecting the technology. We've done research, we've tested, we've iterated, we've validated. But it's only really when it gets into the hands of customers is it truly validated with a real audience. You know, because children are such a unique audience to work with, putting any product, service, or technology in front of them gives you a true test on how that works. So, I mean, what we talk about often internally is that everything should be considered as a voice first experience, but there's no such thing as a voice only experience. So it's only when you see a product like this that brings together the fields of pedagogy and subject matter experts, and then couple that with multimedia, be it animation, sound design, interaction, all underpinned with a combination of solid instructional design and interaction design, does the whole thing really come together. So for me, when I look at this, it's kind of the combination of all the work the team has done at SoapBox, coupled with the expertise of another group of people. And that's when you really get a chance to sort of really understand the potential of the technology. From an interaction point of view, as Toby said, there's no one answer to any of this. Every customer is going to have a different approach, a different goal, a different solution. So again, for my own personal curiosity and for the team at SoapBox, it's fantastic to see how they've taken that tool we've created, worked with it, and turned it into an experience. Because a technology is only as good as its implementation. So all these supporting pieces are critical to making it meaningful to kids. So it's always continually surprising what comes up when people show us things. And I must say, you know, if you've had a bad day at work, I mean, just go on to Lingumi's social media pages and watch some of the videos, and it'll cheer you right up and get you back to work. So I recommend checking that out. But I mean, there's loads of pieces there we could deep dive on. You know, there's so much to unpack in any digital experience. And then when you layer voice on top of that, the additional interaction needs and the additional data points you can get back from that just adds a layer of complexity and opportunity there that can cover 3 or 4 different webinars, really. So I'm excited to talk more about it today.
Great. Toby, I loved you were using words like alive and reciprocal, and you know, and it's one of the things we talk about a lot. And Dec, you talk to our clients a lot about this in studio work. Is, you know, how is it that voice can be so motivating for a child to learn? Like, what is it about voice that helps children to motivates them to learn more, or to practice more, or to engage more? What is it from our lessons? And I mean, for both of you, a question for both of you: what is it that makes voice so motivating for kids as a baked in part of a tool?
I think, you know, one of the reasons I started Lingumi was because I was frustrated by this perception that children could just magical sponges that could absorb information, which in industry manifests in give them some games, show them some videos, put them on YouTube Kids, or, you know, and then they'll just learn stuff. And it's sort of, you know, as with all these things, it's not binary. It's sort of a bit true and a bit false. But you know, what I have learned over the years is that all of the research I did on linguistics and language acquisition when I was at university has been useful for Lingumi, but almost less useful than some of the psychology. And, you know, I remember hearing the concept from the Harvard Center for the Developing Child about serve and return, which when I read that, it was so simple. You know, it's this idea that, you know, when you, like in tennis, you hit a serve, you want to get the ball back across the net. And that's how children feel about communication. And if you, I remember meeting Jack, I can't remember his surname, but the professor, Jack something, who came up with this concept at a conference. He gave me this really great frame of reference, which is when you're in a supermarket and you see a child sitting in the trolley and just asking their parent something, or not even nagging their parent about something. If the parent's ignoring them, that's actively destructive to that child's neural pathways. You've got to respond to your child, especially in their very early years. I think voice technology is just a way of trying to bring that into digital experiences. It's not that it's anything new, it's that it's taking something we know to be true about the human brain, especially in the early years, and then trying to make it accessible to more children across more experiences. So for me, it's a psychology applied to technology.
Great. Dec, I'm sure you've more to add on that.
Yeah, no, we talk about it as being sort of the natural interface. I mean, everyone knows from a really early age, like conversation and speaking is one of the first ways you learn to communicate. So it's only in recent years that you can start applying this to technology. So we assume at the moment, at least in the past decade or so, that like touchscreens are somehow a natural interface for people. Like sliding your finger across a pane of glass, no matter how beautiful that experience is, isn't a natural interaction for a human being. But when you see a kid speak into a device or into a product and get a response back, I mean, there's something there that sort of transcends that traditional interaction piece. So my background is in sort of digital interaction design before I moved into voice, and there was a delight there as well. But even at a really simple level, in the early days when we were looking at stuff, just playing a kid's voice back to them is enough. Like them hearing their voice back, the delight they get from seeing themselves, hearing themselves in a product is huge. And then if you couple that with something that gives them agency over the experience, the motivation they get from that is well above and beyond anything they can get from tapping on a screen or playing a video. It's a whole different level of interaction.
Totally. I think we better, there's lots of questions here, so we better go and look at some of these, and then we can dive into some more. There's a lot of questions around pronunciation. One question here: is there a single accent that's considered the gold standard in English? Toby. I have a sense of what you're going to answer that one, but let's give that one to you and start there.
I'm always interested in talking to our customers and asking them what they think about that. Like, what is it they want for their child? For example, in Taiwan, where we have we're the top kids learning app in Taiwan, we've observed that actually American English historically has been more dominant than British English, but the first course on Lingumi, and actually since then all the English courses just by heritage have been British English. And that's because the curriculum used in Taiwan was always American English curriculum. And so people are more familiar with hearing American English in school. And so parents actively often turn our product down. They will fire us, right? Because we don't have American English. More generally, coming to my real answer to that really interesting question from Siddharth is, when I wondered that as well, I asked one of our earliest academic advisors about giving more accents to kids earlier on. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? And customers ask us, sometimes you say sometimes you say before words. Is one right? Or the and the, just within British English, that very narrow accent. And his response was, it's better to expose them to more variation as early as possible. It's a bit like if you have a British American parent, a British English parent, a British English accented parent and an American English accented parent, you're going to hear different accents growing up, and it's sort of your sort of linguistic programming in your brain is only stronger for it, a bit like growing up bilingually. So my sort of hope for Lingumi is that as we widen our range of teachers, we're also widening our range of accents, but also, to be honest, going beyond accent, ethnicities and just the sort of experiences children have with teachers early in their life form their model for the world. And we want, children in Lingumi to be good global citizens as well. So I think there's no gold standard. And I think Lingumi by heritage is British English, but that's not by design in terms of future plans.
Yeah, and similarly, I mean, SoapBox, we have voices of children from 193 countries around the world, and that is key, having that data as part of our voice engine, a part of building our voice engine and testing our voice engine. It's absolutely key that we can understand every accent and dialect wherever a child is from equally and fairly and reliably. So that's a key part. Dec, did you have anything to add on that particular point?
No, just to kind of echo what you both said. I mean, there's no one correct way in speaking. And it's going to be very use case dependent on what your definition of correct is. So especially if it's a practice or maybe a play experience, you don't want to be punitive to a child, depending on their cultural heritage or their upbringing, about how that experience performs for them. And even in a classroom, like there's no average student. Everyone is going to be completely different. So again, you don't want to penalize people based on their background, and something the SoapBox has spent a lot of time doing. But at the same time, if you want to go granular and talk about a letter sound or a letter name that has a correct answer that isn't subjective, then you have the opportunity to do that as well. So again, it comes down to what your goal in that activity is, without sort of dictating one correct answer for everybody.
And I think Erica's question is naturally leads on to this great question from Erica, which is, how do you deal with strong accents, especially sounds that are very difficult for kids to pronounce? We found it difficult to capture all the possible ways students can mispronounce something without giving too many false positives. Oh, Erica, I don't know if the audience can see the questions, by the way, so I'm just repeating that one. Erica, it's such a hard challenge. I mean, I definitely don't have a good answer to this. Our answer is we lean towards false positives, because it comes back to the psychology thing. We found that children would still rather feel good at the end of the day. But it's worth giving the context that we are not an assessment-driven platform. We're not preparing children for tests. What Declan said it's about play and about joy at the end of the day. If we were doing, let's say, graded reading for an assessment, I think Lingumi would have to go back to the drawing board on that and really look very carefully at the scoring and the thresholding, and doing it by age and doing it by, British English versus American English and all these other things. So never put a toe in that water yet. I'm very interested to hear how the people deal with that who do it.
Dec, I feel like this is bringing us nicely on to a conversation around feedback and scoring. And I do see some questions there around thresholds and that kind of thing. Do you want to kind of take us in that direction a little bit? I mean, you've touched on it already in terms of what the goal of the product is, or the goal of the use case. Do you want to talk a little bit more about scoring?
Yeah, I mean, the whole area of feedback and scoring is quite a large topic. You know, when we talk about scoring, I think what we can do is look at it in terms of, as Toby showed on his slide, what our engine provides, and then the opportunities you have to interpret that data in a way that scores your activity. And I'm going to do a little air quote with scores there, your activity, and gives you the results you want. So if it's our engine provides a confidence score for a word or a letter, right down to the phoneme level. So if you're in a, say, a play experience for language acquisition, and you're showing the kid a picture of a dog. People put in some other examples there, and this one isn't the most creative, but if you were saying, what animal is this, and the answer is dog, right? You might be testing, you're not testing, do they know what a dog is? You want them to say dog, and you want to know, are they saying dog well enough? Do they know their D sound and their OG sound? So you can decide then, as part of your product design, what score is applicable for that. So you can say they said that well enough. So it comes into this territory of what is good enough for your experience for that child in that particular scenario. So you might say, yeah, they said dog, it wasn't perfect, but in this case, it's good enough. Let's move the conversation forward. Let's bring them on to something else, and maybe come back and try some more D sounds later on. If it was, and that's one example, but when you think about feedback, that score determines what that feedback system is. So there's kind of maybe 3 examples. You kind of take that score in and give kids minimal feedback. So that might be in the case of an assessment scenario where there is no real feedback loop, or you just want them to practice expressing words. You want them to verbalize content. The goal there is for them to speak, not to speak only correctly. And it's a bit like maybe Toby's use case. Another one is you can sort of put in gamification or gamified learning pieces. So you could interpret that percentage score as 2 out of 3 stars, or whatever way you want to do it. So the kid gets a feedback loop. They know they've done well. They have an opportunity to do better. So if you had an experience, you can keep them in that loop to improve it and get better. Or if it's in a more educational perspective, maybe you provide scaffolded feedback. So, I see you've said dog, make sure you say duh. So if you get a low score on D, you can play back bespoke content or scaffolded feedback around that score and that score breakdown to help them improve on that pronunciation. So there's no one solution to how you score something, and I'm going to say it depends about 18 times, but it really does depend on your use case and the goal and what that learning outcome is for that activity in terms of how you interpret that score.
Yeah, because in SoapBox's world, I mean, so we don't develop any front-end products ourselves. We're the voice technology that powers these products. So we do everything from powering Lingumi, who wants kids to be engaged and motivated and keep going and keep moving forward, learning a language or learning phonics, all the way up to oral reading fluency and comprehension, where we're actually feeding back data points like self-corrections, repetitions, pauses, all of those really, really important data points into a teacher dashboard. And the teacher dashboard is sitting there looking at each student and seeing all of their rich and granular data Dec, you might be able to share more on that, or
I'll let Toby jump in as well, but there's effectively, when we think about it, there's 2 key audiences. There's the kid or the child, someone who's using the product, and then there's the parent, educator, teacher, the other person. So that score, that data you have to work with, how you interpret that and feed that back to those 2 very different audiences are completely separate. So a kid may get no feedback. They might get the thumbs up. They might get a character somersault. there's different ways of providing that to a student or a kid. But when it comes to, as you say, the teacher or those dashboard experiences, you can get really granular in terms of that data. So you can provide a summary view to a teacher for an entire classroom, and they know that this kid got 8 out of 10. For me, that's good enough. Let's move them on. Or you can say, show me where they're struggling, listen back to that audio, understand where they're having problems, and maybe decide the correct course of intervention.
Let's see. So I don't know if any of my technical colleagues on deck, unless you can answer this one from Laurie about integrating with systems like Lollipop. If any of my technical colleagues are here and can answer that one, we will leave that one with them. Let's see, what else have we got in here? Not in Germany soon. German is definitely on the roadmap, Jonas, but not this year, let's say, for German. Let's see, Dec, did you want to show some of the slides that you had around some of that feedback, the data feedback, or does that make sense now to do that?
We can go into the data in a bit more detail, or we could maybe look at the sort of that conversational loop around just feedback in general, because like feedback and then scoring are two separate things, and the key thing is to make sure you know what your feedback loop is for the student, and then the scoring and the data piece is kind of a follow-on piece from that. So when you're designing an experience, that core conversational loop is what you need to establish first, and then you can determine your scoring rubric or methodology or metaphors from that.
Maybe just to pick up a couple really quickly here, because I just conscious of leaving someone answer. Just answer Rona's one. I'm going to press answer live. I don't know what this does, but let me try it. Well, maybe I don't know if it's visible on the screen now. Anyway, it says, "Do you have any data on how often the technology recognizes accurate speech?" This is a sort of circular problem. The answer is you have to manually audit, which we have done, which is quite fun actually, listening to kids, anonymized recordings. In our experience, the scores given by SoapBox, and I'm not being paid to say this, I promise. I'm not getting a discount. The scores given by SoapBox are accurate. In the sense that, as Declan said earlier, it's a confidence score. How confident is the algorithm that the child said the thing that you want them to say? And the algorithm's confidence maps to the human's confidence pretty well. So if there's a super noisy environment and there's 3 kids shouting at the same time and you're trying to get them to say a long phrase, your confidence is lower, but you can probably recognize it to be the thing you're looking for, and you might get a 20 or a 30. And if it's a 7-year-old speaking nice and clearly, to answer the question from Hazel about age of confidence thresholds, it's sort of bang on. It's 100% accuracy in the sense of confidence. And to come back to Siddharth's question, it's not saying 100% accuracy to a specific accent. It's saying we are 100% confident that the child said the thing we want them to say against a whole pool of accents that would be considered equally good to say that thing. So we're not training it on like one voice. We're not training it at all. SoapBox are. And then to answer this anonymous attendee, very mysterious. Does the SoapBox feedback on score inform the front-end feedback or scaffolding response students receive? And if so, what's the lag time on that data loop? So basically, if you want to give a child a contingent response based on what they said, how quick is it? In our experience, again, I really promise I'm not being paid to say this, the slow bit will be your own server crunching the recording down to a compressed recording and getting that up to the cloud. The actual API response, once you've done that, is really quick. So the bottleneck is not at the API response. The bottleneck is probably how you process the audio. And unless you go down to the level of on-device, which is nowadays more and more possible, you are going to just have to get a file up to the internet. And if they're on a 3G connection, that's going to be pretty slow. But big tech, 5G and stuff, is moving faster than us on that. So it's all getting very quick.
The funny thing on that is that because kids love hearing their own voices, oftentimes the experience, and maybe we'll go from here actually into diving into UX experience, voice UX experiences, is that the kids love to hear their own voices. So once they've said something, repeating it back to them as the scoring is happening in the background is a really nice, kids love that, right, Toby, to hear their own voices back and then get the scores.
Yeah, we've played with that in a different experiences. You get it or don't get it. We often get, that's what Amazon call a weasel word. We get 2 to 3 messages a month saying, can you add more repeats of my child's voice? They love hearing it, which is sort of, we do it less than we could, I suppose. But yeah, they do like it.
Yeah. So I think just to close out the scoring topic, I can just share a quick screenshot here and we can run through just a quick visualization of what we're talking about. It might be better than sort of talking in the abstract. And Toby showed something very similar. This is just a side-by-side example. I'll let that window disappear. So on the right-hand side, this is a similar breakdown to what Toby showed that time. And sorry, Toby, I think I have you on screen as the speaker at the moment. But on the right-hand side, we basically have the basic JSON response, which is the core response that we get from the engine. So here you can see that the kid was asked to say the word zip, but they said zip instead. So we basically have an overall score for the word, right? So again, depending on what you're testing, that 60%, let's assume it's a practice scenario or just language acquisition, that's good enough. We can decide to take action on that. What you also have the option to see is the phonemic breakdown in that. So what we can show you back is that they got the S and the Z sound confused. So you know that they're making a mistake, whether it's they're misreading the graphing on screen or they're getting the sound confused. You know that they're not getting the S sound correct, but the I and P sounds are fine. So again, if you're doing maybe phoneme isolation and you want to focus on that S sound, at that point you know that they've got this incorrect in this scenario, and you can provide feedback on this. So the diagram on the left is just a visualization of the score. The piece on the right is what the engine provides back. So in this simple one word, you have all this data that you can take different actions on, and that is what sort of underpins that feedback. What powers the feedback in your experience.
Great. Dec, we have 10 minutes left. It's flown already. So I was thinking, you guys were going to talk about voice UX best practices. Will we dive into that and spend a little bit of time? Toby, you're doing a much better job than I'm doing, by the way, at picking out the questions and answering them. So feel free to continue that as well. If there's any questions there that you see that we want to make sure we get answered before the end of the session here.
Yeah, and please keep adding the questions. I mean, we will get to them eventually, maybe not on air, but we do love to see them.
I just want to take this opportunity to go off piste to mention another edtech startup who I think are very brilliant, and they're called EEDI. And what they got very good at doing, just looking at the example of SIP versus ZIP, what you don't know is what was the context. Was it that the child misread the grapheme, or was it that they mispronounced the grapheme that they correctly read? And what ED are very good at doing, and you should go and talk to them, contact Ben, is creating a sort of a set of questions in the right order to help you also find those things out. Like, was it this error or that error that the child made? And I think, my sort of key message about voice is that, like, you can get voice right, but you can get all things around it wrong. And so your experience design and your product design has to, and this is education is really hard, you want to make money and have an easy life, go to fintech. But education is hard because you've got all of these things you've got to consider, including the scaffolding of your questions and the pedagogical model you're using. And the this bit of it has been made very easy, and SoapBox are very good at making it easy, but don't ignore, don't make a great voice experience and ignore all the rest. You've got to go do your research on how to scaffold especially for an assessment, how to scaffold your questions and so on. So EEDI are really great thinkers on that topic. Not trying to sell their product, but they've got some public research, I think, on how to do it.
Fantastic.
I mean, we are a little short on time, so maybe we jump back to maybe that challenge that Toby was having around that sort of time to talk piece. Because when you're dealing with voice interaction design, it's best to think about it as a sort of tiny conversation. So all the rules and best practices around conversational design and that form of interaction all hold true when you're adding voice to an experience. The challenges you have with a kid's voice experience is that if you're having that conversation in person, there's a whole range of other things that are happening, sort of micro expressions, agreement, nods, body language, tone. A lot of that stuff won't be present in a digital experience. So you have to find metaphors and solutions to replicate or support some of those pieces that mightn't be as present in those experiences. What I might do, if it's okay with you, Toby, is I might share your slide back again. Because it is one of those really interesting problems, or should I say challenges, to solve, because it's a relatively new field for people in terms of sorry, just make sure it loads up here. It's a relatively new problem for people to try and solve, because especially if you have an independent experience where a child is doing this by themselves, the role of your product or app becomes the role of that parent or teacher. So that feedback loop is very important. The really interesting thing is that everything that Toby has tried, Toby and the team at Lingumi have tried in their product, these are all correct. It's like there's no wrong answer here. So tappable buttons, automatic listening, and that hand-ear feedback piece, they're all really solid approaches to solving this challenge. I thought it was really interesting to see the front camera video feed piece. It's not something I had seen before until I saw Lingumi's product, and that really plays into that piece of, a child loves hearing their own voice back, but they love seeing themselves and being part of an experience as well. So the answer to the problem is a combination of all these things, and it's a really interesting area to dive into. But the key thing is that you have to get to a point where the child or the student knows it's their turn to talk, and they know what to do to respond at that point. The key to doing that is not just picking the right metaphor and having those visual cues, but almost that onboarding piece, the piece that happens before this. So as Toby said, if you don't surround it with the correct pedagogy, you can't just deal with this one activity in isolation. So there's loads of different ways to do it, whether it's visual metaphors, there's state changes in UI, there's the listening piece if you have an avatar or a character on screen as well. So, I mean, Toby, did you come across any one solution that was looking like it was more successful than another when you were looking at this?
Well, I'm not going to answer your question, but I'm going to add another layer of this, which is what we've observed from auditing the recordings sometimes is, and you can decide how you want to handle the data output here, is there are different ways of asking questions. Again, I'm dealing with the non-assessed formats here. So if you're trying to get a child to say the phrase, "Where is the dog?" you can say, "Can you say, where is the dog?" And sometimes the child will say nothing. And sometimes they'll say, "Where is the dog?" And sometimes they'll say, "Can you say, where is the dog?" And they'll repeat everything they heard back, because previously they played an activity that got them to repeat something like dog. So they do call and response. And again, it's about pedagogical design, what you want to do with that. Has the child, they've sort of not understood in the sense that they repeated too much information. So they've really grokked what the teacher's saying to them. In Lingumi's case, it's always the teacher. But equally, they have spoken, and they have spoken the bit of the phrase correctly they want to speak. And so, that's an interesting question. Equally, if you want to do it, Lingumi has a tripartite pedagogical structure: LPA, learn, perform, and apply. Learn would be understanding something, perform would be repeating it back to build confidence, creating the sounds, and then apply would be applying it in a real situation. So if I said, how could I ask a question to find out where my pet is? The perfect response would be the child says, where is the dog? That'd be a question to find out where my pet is. If you, at that point, a teacher, that's quite a hard question in Lingumi world, the teacher would just stop and listen, or the button would appear, or so on. But the difficult part is when you get to that level of complexity, it's not how you capture the sound. At that point of complexity, the child probably knows your product well enough that they know how to use whichever of these interfaces or any other interface you give them. It's what do you do with the information if the child is wrong? And you can approach this like a tree structure, and you can have sort of 37 possible incorrect answer things, or you could use generative AI and synthesize a response. But the technology problems are solved. This is not extremely cutting edge technology to try and respond to the child. The hard part is the pedagogical decisions you're taking. Should you say, should you take the child into a kind of more focus on that language goal? Should you assume the child hasn't got to that level and go backwards and give them easier stuff? We all probably know Duolingo, which overemphasizes easy content because they've decided that that's psychologically good to the learner, because their goal, after all, is not you learning, it's them making money. Sorry, that's just a joke. If anyone here from Duolingo listening, so I think we can talk a lot about individual voice UI design. We can talk a lot about recording and scoring and accuracy. But to be honest, none of it's easy. It's all hard, right? But these are easier bits than actually designing like a really cohesive, well-structured pedagogical experience. This is just one layer of that enormous cake.
Brilliant. I think on that note, we may consider finishing up. There are a couple of questions here, really great questions. BJ, your question is fantastic. I don't think we have time to dive into it quite this minute, but if not, we will follow up with you on that. Final thoughts, if from both of you, if the audience here are thinking about, if they've never put voice into any product before for children, educational product, and they're thinking about it, what would be the one thing? I mean, you've talked about so many different best practices and lessons learned, both of you. What would be the one thing each of you would give as a piece of advice, apart from do it? What would be the next thing that you would suggest? Toby, do you want to go first?
I think the hardest part for building any product is going and spending time with your user using the early versions of it. And so my parting shot is, do not over-engineer a solution where you're handling the data output in a certain way and routing the child. Just go and put in the simplest possible implementation and just sit on the floor with a toddler, on the desk with a teenager, and just watch them try to use the thing you built, and be very upset at how wrong it goes, and then iterate before you spend any time handling the data. Wonderful. Love it. Dec?
Yeah, no, that'd be my top one as well. So, I mean, kids can be delightful. They can be heartbreaking. There's no filter there. They'll tell you exactly what they think, and you might spend months on a prototype, and they'll walk away in 10 seconds. And there's they don't mind if they hurt your feelings. They don't even care about that. So get it in front of kids, get it in front of your user, be it a teacher or a kid, and just get feedback early and often. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Toby, for joining us today. And we will be in touch with everybody afterwards, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks again. Bye.